Here is your WESN News on the hour. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Cunupia man fatally shot in Minimart attack. MP Amin calls for probe into $200 million secondary roads funds. Soca Warriors face Cuba without key striker, crucial win. And internationally, missing New Zealand father and children spotted after 3 years. Now for the details. A 46-year-old Cunupia resident, Dinesh Lal, was gunned down at a Minimart on Raghunan Road Tuesday the 8th around 7 p.m. A lone gunman approached Lal inside the store and opened fire, striking him several times. The attacker then fled in a white Nissan Note parked outside. Police officers from the Central Division and Homicide Bureau were called to the scene where Lal was pronounced dead. Investigations are ongoing. St. Augustine MP Khadija Amin has called for a full investigation into the $200 million allocated to the Secondary Roads Rehabilitation and Improvement Company. Speaking in the budget debate, Amin questioned why the funds meant for road repairs have not improved the condition of secondary roads across the country. She criticized the shift of funds from regional corporations to the company, citing audits, corruption claims, and unpaved roads. Amin also highlighted the issue with contractor payments, local government salaries, and a lack of funding for critical services like water distribution and dengue prevention efforts. She further demanded clarity on the $43 million recently transferred to CPEP and the reforestation program, questioning how it was used so close to the end of the fiscal year. Trinidad and Tobago's national football team is set to face Cuba on October 10th in the CONCACAF Nations League. Needing a win to avoid relegation to League B, the Soca Warriors, currently last in Group B, are under pressure to secure 3 points after a 4-0 loss to Honduras and a 0-0 draw with French Guiana. Key striker Tyrese Spicer has been ruled out due to injury, adding pressure to the team's attacking lineup. Coach Derek King and Captain Aubrey David remain focused on the task, with returning players Kevin Molino and Jovan Jones adding much-needed experience to the squad. TT will play the match on artificial turf at the Antonio Maceo Stadium in Cuba, aiming to overcome a young but determined Cuban side. Internationally, in New Zealand, Tom Phillips and his 3 children missing since December 2021 have been spotted for the first time in nearly 3 years. A group of teenage pig hunters captured footage of Phillips and his children, Ember, Maverick, and Jada, walking through the bush in the Waikato region. Phillips, armed and sporting a long beard, led his children, who were masked and carrying backpacks. Police confirmed the sighting as credible and reassuring to the children's wider family. A search was launched following the sighting, but Phillips and the children remain elusive. Authorities suspect they are being assisted by others and continuing to urge anyone with information to come forward. The children's mother expressed relief but criticized Phillips for using them as pawns and called on authorities to intensify their search efforts. Phillips is also wanted in connection with a 2022 bank robbery. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
Good day, Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean, the world. Welcome to this week's edition of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. I am your host, Rondell Dono, attorney at law. Once again, I'm happy to be here. Once again, I'm happy to bring the law and you. And of course, you can watch us on traditional media, which is WESN, Content Capital, as well as on YouTube, and our podcast, Strictly Legal with RondellDonoa.com. We have a special guest today, newly conferred, well, a few months ago, Mr. Lee Mary, Senior Counsel. And we are going to speak today about building a justice system that puts victims first, both in the civil and the criminal jurisdiction. But before we get there, we have our exciting segment called Legal Lingo. Let's go. So our legal word for today is tort. What is tort? Now, a tort is a civil wrong when someone causes harm or loss to another person, not because they broke a contract, but because they failed to follow a legal duty they had towards that person. The person harmed can usually seek compensation, often in the form of monies, for damages caused. Right, so that's basically the layman definition of tort. And let's put this into context, right? Now, suppose a driver is speeding and not paying attention on the road. As a result, the driver crashes into another car, causing injury to the other driver and damage to their vehicle. In this case, the speeding driver has breached a duty of care that drivers owe to each other under the law. The duty to drive safely and responsibly. The injured party can sue the negligent driver in a civil court to obtain compensation, as we know damages, for their medical bills, vehicle repairs, and other losses. Now, this is a tort because it involves a civil wrong, that is the failure to drive carefully, that cause harm to another person, and the remedy for this wrong is compensation and not punishment like in the criminal case. But of course, we will get more into it with our guests. So that was tort on Legal Lingo. We will be right back. You are watching Strictly Legal.
Come travel with us as we explore Diwali across the globe. Diwali is celebrated in many countries worldwide, but do you know the traditions and practices of each nation? From Guyana to Australia, WESN presents Diwali Passport.
October 9th to October 30th, with replays on October 31st.
It's Diwali Passport, a WESN exclusive.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
And we are back. We are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. And before the break, I informed you guests that we have, well, not in studio, but via Zoom, Mr. Lee Mary, Senior Counsel. And I will just speak a bit about him. He's an accomplished advocate, specializes in complex commercial disputes. Now, Lee has appeared for a number of large private and public corporate bodies in disputes involving breach of contract, breach of fiduciary duty, and complex construction claims. Lee also has extensive experience prosecuting complex fraud claims in the civil and criminal courts. He regularly provides advice to multinational corporations in the areas of money laundering, fraud, and tax practice. Lee has a wide and varied public law practice and specializes in novel and complex constitutional claims. He has appeared on behalf of members of vulnerable groups, such as victims of sex abuse, in claims that seek to widen the scope of protection afforded to victims of crime. He is the founder of the non-profit company High Tide Project, which engages in strategic litigation aimed at achieving transparency and accountability from public institutions. And as I said, he is now senior counsel, which means his fees are higher. But, but of course, you know, at the end of the day, he has earned his stripes. And I would like to welcome Mr. Lee Mary. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Rondell. Thank you for having me on your program.
Thanks for joining us. And I'm most grateful for you to be here. You are one of many senior counsels who have graced the strict legal set. So thank you.
No problem. Thanks again.
Right. So of course, today we are chatting about building a justice system that puts victims first. And I know in our conversations we spoke about many novel cases that you would have advocated for. And we would like to touch basically on tort law in the civil jurisdiction as well as the rights of victims in criminal. But before we get there, of course, how are you? How are you? How are you today?
No, I'm great. I've been busy with my court matters.
Yes, I know you have a full schedule.
Yes, a full schedule. But yeah, I mean, I really can't complain.
That's good. That's good. So basically, right? So when people think of victims' interest, they often associate that with criminal justice system. But you have recently had a case where you were seeking justice for victims in civil courts. So can you tell us about that case, the facts of that case?
Yeah. Before I go into the facts of the case, I think it might be useful for your viewers if I just give a brief explanation about the difference between the criminal and the civil law. I know you've kind of touched upon it in your explanation of what is a tort. But one of the main purposes of the law generally is to regulate human conduct. And it does this through those two branches of the law, namely the criminal and the civil. Generally speaking, those two branches, they serve different purposes. The criminal will regulate conduct by punishing offenders and thereby deterring other persons from engaging in the conduct. Normally, for criminal offenses, the ultimate punishment will be imprisonment in jail. The criminal law also, it is administered by the state. In other words, it does not depend on, in all cases, a victim coming forward necessarily at all. We can think of crimes, for instance, where you don't need to have a victim, such as driving under the influence, drug possession or trafficking, and many other crimes where there would not be a specified victim, so to speak. The civil law is different. It regulates human conduct because it allows individuals to come to the civil court. So this is not the state coming to the court. It's the individual, the victim themselves, coming to the court to get redress against another person who may have harmed them. So it's really a private matter between two parties. And usually, instead of punishing, for instance, by imprisonment, which will have the effect of deterring conduct, which is what the criminal law is about, in this type of case, a civil case, the person who is harmed is compensated by a money award. In civil proceedings, even though there is no option of a jail sentence, In fact, there are other forms of relief, and this is why these civil proceedings are important for victims.
Yeah.
There are other forms of relief that would not be available in a criminal case, such as an injunction, which is basically an order of a judge that either mandates the person who harmed you to do something or stops them from doing something. And these types of orders can be obtained urgently. Now, Rondell, you would know about the issues that we have. If it's a criminal matter and you report it to the police, the issues that you will have in terms of getting them to act swiftly. Sometimes it's not always possible. But the civil court, on the other hand, it can provide a swift remedy if you go to the court and you seek an injunction, for instance.
No.
But what people need to understand is that many types of conduct are both criminal offenses and civil wrongs. So it's not one or the other. And a classic example of that is the O.J. Simpson case that many people will be aware of. O.J. Simpson, of course, was accused of killing his wife, and they had a criminal trial. The criminal trial, O.J. Simpson was found not guilty. But later on, years later, the family of the deceased, succeeded in a civil action based on the same conduct, based on him allegedly having killed his wife. So you see that there were two sets of proceedings in that case that were brought, and on one succeeded, which was the civil case. The criminal case did not succeed. Now, of course, the reason for that is that the standard of proof in a criminal case is much higher.
Yeah.
You have to prove something beyond reasonable doubt, whereas in the civil case, it's just a balance of probability. So there's no inconsistency between those two things.
No, and of course, recently we also have the case of Sean Combs, Diddy, basically in terms of the persons are now seeking compensation. Well, supposed victims are now seeking compensation in the civil jurisdiction. Simultaneously, he is now being brought before the courts in the criminal jurisdiction for practically the same type of offense, but I guess it's different charges.
Yes, it's a different. Yeah, the different aims of the two types of proceedings. So I tell people often as an example, if you at work and your coworker loses their mind and hits you a cuff in your head, it is both a criminal offense of battery and it's also a civil offense of battery, and both can be pursued at the same time. You can go to the police, report it, and they can be charged in a criminal court and they're facing jail time.
Yes.
But they can also be sued by you in the civil court for money, for compensation. So they both exist at the same time, and there are most types of misconduct that is a criminal offense. You can find some type of civil offense to match up with it. So it's important for victims, I explained already why, to have these two avenues. Now, what's important to understand as well is that the law, and this is both the civil law and the criminal law, the law is not static. And that is because the morals of society change over time. There may be technological advancements over time, which sometimes requires the law to develop, and there would be the creation of either new criminal offenses or of new civil wrongs. Now, the criminal law, normally, this is just generally, because it can happen differently, but normally the criminal law is developed through legislation. So Parliament will pass an act to say certain conduct is now a criminal offense. And a recent example was the creation of being in possession of child pornography as a criminal offense, which I think we may speak about later in the program.
Yeah.
That was never a criminal offense before. So prior to, it's about 10 years now, it's been an offense. Prior to that, you could have had in your possession child pornography. You could have made child pornography. It was not an offense against the criminal law. But the state has seen it fit because of advancements, I guess, in technology and the fact that this thing has been proliferated to pass laws that mean that if you get caught with such material, you will go to jail, or you're likely to go to jail.
Yes.
We have as well recently a creation of a criminal offense of harassment that many people are not aware of, but that did not exist until fairly recently, which basically means that if somebody keeps doing anything, calling you over and over on the phone, and you keep telling them, don't call me, or they come outside their house and shouting at you over and over again, it causes you distress, that is actually a criminal offense.
Yeah.
So that is something that's been developed over time. Now, the civil courts, on the other hand, or the civil law, sorry, tends to more develop, and once again, it's not a rule, but it tends to more be developed by the courts. And it's developed in terms of wrongs through the law of tort. So we spoke about battery, your employee cuff you in your head. That is a tort of battery. If your spouse or anybody at home locks you in a room and keeps you there for days, that is a tort of false imprisonment, which is also a criminal offense. And what I think we'll talk about today is that there's an area of tort law that has been rapidly developing because of changing technology, and that is the area surrounding privacy and privacy rights.
Yes.
Now, the difficulty with privacy, it makes it interesting, but it's a more difficult question, is that whereas with a battery, it is fairly clear to any right-thinking person that if someone cuffs you in your head or locks you in a room for days, that is a wrong that you should be able to go to court and get a remedy for. But in terms of privacy, it is not as clear-cut as those types of wrongs. So for instance, if you are walking in a mall, a shopping plaza, and you have your child with you, your young child, 3, 4 years old, and some stranger comes up to you and takes a picture of your child, and you have not given them consent to do so, is that something that you should be able to go to a court, a civil court, and either get compensation or, as I've discussed already, get a remedy to force them to delete the photograph or to stop them, let's say, putting it up on the internet? That is a more difficult question that people may answer differently.
Yeah.
So these are the type of questions that around the world people have been grappling with. What are the limits of the tort law as it relates to the privacy interest? And this is where the first case that you wanted me to speak about is probably relevant.
Yes, and this is basically a case that that obviously you were attorney or the counsel for the victims. If you can just probably just relay in terms of those facts and the tort of intrusion. I believe this is a new tort. Besides privacy, could you just explain between privacy and intrusion? What is the difference based on obviously your research and the novelty of this?
Right. So the facts of the case, I think, would assist us a little bit. So
yes.
This is a case where there was a shopping plaza, I think for want of a better term, which had different tenants. So there was a doctor's office and there was a seamstress, etc. And each of the tenants had control over a bathroom. And very near to this shopping plaza was a secondary school. And early in the morning, 7 a.m., the seamstress, who's in control of her own bathroom, she says that she hears noises coming from the bathroom. So she calls the owner of this shopping plaza, who happens to also have a store in the vicinity. And he comes to the bathroom and he says that he's suspicious about what's going on in there. And he knocks on the door, nobody opens. And then he says another tenant comes, and that tenant has his phone. And he basically instructs that tenant, take a picture, right? We're saying he really intended a video in any event. When the door is open, when the owner of the shopping plaza, and he's the defendant, he's the one who we say did committed the wrong, he opens the door when it's eventually opened, and he sees 2 children in school uniform, a male and a female. Both of them are clearly in school uniform. Both of them are inside of a bathroom. And he basically curses at them. He says, "I'm calling the police. What you all doing in here?" Now, while this is happening, the other tenant, the gentleman, is filming this whole thing of them being in the bathroom. And obviously on the film, you can hear the owner saying all of these things. So when you see the film that has the children's face in it, you can see there's a bathroom and you hear what the owner of the premises is saying. It's a very salacious video. It only lasts about 20 seconds. It's very salacious. And basically that video ended up on Facebook it ended up on the headline news, and we are saying that it caused the children, a lot of distress and embarrassment. And basically the video, that's the nature of the beast, is that this video is going to be out there forever and ever, right?
Yeah.
And the question for the court in the case was, look, we have, even if we cannot prove that that video was distributed by the owner, who is the defendant, is it that, because we could not prove, because the phone used to take the video was someone else's, even if we can't prove that he distributed it, is it a tort? Is it a wrong for him simply to have opened that door, kept the children, because he kept them in there, he did not allow them to leave, and for him to basically cause a recording to be made of them inside of that room? Now, we have argued that Trinidad and Tobago should follow other jurisdictions, such as Canada, such as New Zealand, and that they should recognize a tort, and it's a new tort that's never been recognized here before, called intrusion. It's really intrusion upon seclusion. And what it basically means is that once you intrude on the private space of somebody, regardless of whether you distribute it, and regardless of whether, because the law used to be before, you had to show some duty of confidence between people. So it had to be an employer and an employee, or a husband and a wife. In this case, there's no relationship between the owner of the premises and the kids, right? They have no duty of confidence. We can't prove it was distributed. But is the mere taking of the video itself, is that a tort? And it has been recognized in other countries. In New Zealand, there was a case where a gentleman had put a spy cam in a female's shower and had recorded what was going on in there. Now, he never distributed it. He simply put the camera there and he kept it on his own laptop. Someone happened to find it. And it would not have been caught by any other existing tort. There was no wrong that would have been committed apart from this intrusion tort. And in Canada, the case had to do with a woman spying, a woman who worked in a bank, spying on her ex-husband's new lover's financial information. And in that case, she did not distribute the financial information. She didn't tell anybody. She was just looking at the other lady's finances because she was an employee in the bank over the course of many years. And the courts in Canada said, even though she didn't distribute it, even though she had no relationship of confidence with the lady, that it was this tort of intrusion. So we are saying that because of the advancements in technology, and because of how easy it is to acquire certain technology, including cameras, that the court should recognize that the intrusion itself is a tort. And that is what the Court of Appeal is deciding on that right now. We've made the arguments and we are awaiting the decision in that case.
So this is basically a novel case in our jurisdiction, correct?
Yes.
And just for the viewer's sake, how are tort created? Because obviously persons, the layman may just know about law in terms of a legislation. But when we are now creating a tort, can you just explain how has a tort been created? And in this context, tort is T-O-R-T, of course, for persons who may be wondering.
Yes, creation may not be the best term. I apologize if I probably did use it, but it's really more a development of the law. And the case law basically says that the law, the common law, it can be developed, but it must be developed incrementally. You should not be making huge steps in the development of the law. So in this case, we have argued that the court, it is a development of what we had previously. What we had previously was an offense of breach of confidence. And breach of confidence, I don't know if you recall, there was this case involving a cricketer.
Yes. Where
he was sent certain nude, I think, videos or images from his girlfriend, and he would have sent it to other persons. In that case, there was the obligation of confidence, of course, between him and his girlfriend, and he did distribute it. So that fell under that tort. But in this case, the case I was speaking about, of course, we can't prove those things. So we are asking the court to develop the law, expand it. It's not really the creation of I I guess we're splitting hairs.
Yeah,
You can
yeah,
argue
yeah,
it,
yeah.
it has a new name, right? Because the elements are different, right? But it really is a development of the law to meet new circumstances. And the reason that it's done is because the court recognizes that, look, something wrong has happened and it is unjust to leave the claimant without a remedy in the circumstances of the case.
Now, why is it important for remedies? Now, even if you are harmed, of course, you know, in civil jurisdiction, your remedy is compensation. But then, even though the court recognizes, okay, that you have been your privacy has been breached, or that the court awards compensation, the perpetrator just having to be awarded costs rather than some form of penal sentence to really drive across to really make the big victim feel as though, okay, justice has been served. You know, because money, yes, money can assist, but then it still does not, bring back one's reputation, or however you wish to state it.
Yes, I would agree. And I think most people would agree that, for instance, we just taking an example, a gym owner puts a secret camera, you know, in the bathrooms or something, and is taking footage. Now, even if he doesn't distribute that, he's just keeping it for himself. I mean, I think most people would agree that that is something serious enough that it should be a criminal offense. So it could be, a criminal offense could be created. And in some jurisdictions, I know that in the UK, they do have criminal offenses. For instance, I think it's called voyeurism.
Yeah, voyeurism,
right? In the UK, there's a criminal offense of voyeurism that was created by a statute. But that is a separate matter. It is up to our parliament, really, to recognize that, look, somebody could go on Amazon and purchase, you know, some of these devices for very little amount of money. And this harm can be caused. And of course, there's a risk as well that these things get out there on the internet and they're there forever. Yeah. And that it is something very serious, that there should be criminal sanctions for that. But we are saying, remember, I've explained that just because there are criminal sanctions, it's really a separate matter, because we are saying, regardless of that, there should also be a civil action, because the civil is very important in cases like this, because what the person can do if they discover that somebody's keeping or recording them and they're keeping it themselves, you can go to court and you can tell a court, look, this is my evidence that this person is doing this, and I want an injunction. I mean, you will get it immediately, you get it the next day, right? If it's serious enough. Basically stopping the person from dealing with those images, sending them out or whatever, right? And stopping them from doing the conduct. And it puts the action really in the hands of the victim. The victim does not need to rely on the police, you know, to go and do their work. Yes. And what's good as well about the civil court is that what we have done in all of these cases, for instance, this case with the kids in the bathroom, is that we have gotten anonymity orders. So nobody knows what these kids' names are. The court has agreed, look, we will name them by just some letters, right? So the case name is MA, right? So people don't need to be afraid about
that's not necessarily
their getting out.
Sorry, that's not necessarily their initials. It's just
not necessarily their initials. It could be anything, but in other words, they can be anonymized, right? Whereas when you go to the police, I think many people are fearful for whatever reasons, you know, about it getting out there, that this thing exists. So they may know it's happening, but they may not want to bring it to the authorities because they don't want to publicize it themselves by making a complaint.
Totally. And how does the court decide how much money someone gets if they prove that they have been intruded upon, particularly in our jurisdiction? What type of award are we looking at? And of course the factors.
It will depend a lot on the facts of the particular case, of course. So it's a bit difficult to say in terms of a exact money value. But in similar cases, for instance, we've had some constitutional claims dealing with the right to privacy, because it's clear that you can bring a constitutional claim for breach of right to privacy, because we do have a constitutional right to privacy. But the problem with that is that the Constitution really, you can only bring a constitutional motion against the state. You can't bring it against an individual. So we have some cases where people have alleged that their right to privacy has been infringed by the state. So for instance, we had a police recruit in one of the cases I did, who was strip searched while she was at the barracks. And we said we couldn't bring it under a battery or anything like that because she wasn't touched. The officer who was searching her simply told her to take off her clothes and do different things. So it was a constitutional wrong. And I mean, she was awarded in excess of $100,000 for that. And that was not a recording, there was nothing permanent. It was just the fact that they told this lady to do this and they weren't entitled to. So one can get significant damages, but I think what people really would be very concerned to know is that the civil court also has the power to stop the conduct and also to mandate somebody to destroy what they have, etc., which I think most people out there, yes, it's important to get compensation, but what they really want to do is to stop further harm from happening.
Right. So in your experience, for something such as this matter, that this novel case that you are now counsel over, what if successful, what sort of award would you be seeking on behalf of your clients?
Well, we are seeking significant damages in this particular case. That's what I would say because as I say, this is, one can appreciate the harm,
Yes.
to a young person. Their faces are there recorded, and it's there forever. I mean, this young man was 17, right? And when you look at the video, it really does, especially what the gentleman is saying to him, it makes it appear, that they're doing something wrong and actually doing something criminal in that bathroom, which I mean, it's clearly not, it's not a criminal offense. It was not a criminal offense, even if these kids had been engaging, in that behavior. The new Children's Act, has for the most part decriminalized some of these offenses between two children, right? So even though they were not doing anything wrong under the law, in essence, this video will be out there in perpetuity forever.
Correct.
So we are seeking significant damages for that.
And when let's briefly discuss, of course, law and morality, because sometimes it can sometimes be overlapped according to who is the person that is really presiding over such matter, because an argument can be such that, well, why are these children in a bathroom and therefore they're not supposed to be there? So because they're not supposed to be there in a public space doing whatever they are doing, therefore they don't really, they deserve to be highlighted, let's put it that way, because they should not be there in the first place. It is morally wrong for minors to be engaging in such acts in public places. What are your comments about that?
Well, first of all, I need to be clear that in this particular case, there was no evidence that they were doing anything sexual in the bathroom.
Yeah.
A. And B, even if they were, it would not have been unlawful, right? So once you establish that it was not unlawful, I think really in terms of the court really ought not to be imposing its own moral standards basically on the case and saying that, oh, well, because I deemed that what they were doing was wrong and they should not have been there. In essence, they look for that. That is not the right approach in my respectful view. Now, of course, I need to be careful about what I say because
Indeed.
the matter is still before the Court of Appeal has yet to be determined, right?
Certainly.
But our argument is that, they were children, first of all. That's where you start. They're children, and children are recognized in law as a vulnerable group. So the court, when it's making its decisions, needs to appreciate that, look, children, their minds are still developing. I mean, I think some people sometimes they have difficulty remembering that they weren't, or what they were like, when they were children. And we make mistakes when we're growing up,
Yeah.
and somebody should not be penalized in this way, basically, and made to suffer, forever, you know, because of some error they would have made if it was an error, which we don't accept, right?
Indeed.
Because as I say, there was no evidence of them engaging in that conduct, and even if they were, it was not unlawful. Now, I guess you could say, if you're drawing inferences, really, 2 school children should not be in a bathroom, right? But that is not anything legal, right? That is just you imposing your own views, your own moral views on the facts of the case.
Indeed, and we are dealing with what's the facts and the law, correct? So let's look at the obviously we understand and appreciate the rights of victims in civil cases. Of course, the reliefs are a compensation, or there can be an injunction, not so, to prevent someone from further doing an act, etc.
Yes, those are the remedies that would be available to the civil court.
And let's turn now to the criminal side. Of course, you know, victims. I mean, we are a society where it's high crime, and therefore there are a lot of victims in various ways. Now, you have brought about a number of cases which seeks to challenge the status quo as it relates to treatment of victims in the criminal justice system. Now tell us about the facts of a particular case that was recently decided, which basically dealt with the effect of delay on victims, and of course in our jurisdiction.
Yes, so this is another case that we brought. This really has to do with the criminal law, but it was a case that we brought in the constitutional court. So this was a case against the state, because of course it's the state, as I explained, that administers the criminal law. And what had happened, the facts of this case is that a young lady, she was 16, and she says that she was raped by an older gentleman while he was giving her a drop home. And she reported it, and he was charged. Now, she became pregnant with his child, and she had the child, and she suffered some, as you would imagine, some serious psychological issues as a result of the rape. But then what happened is that we have obtained, you know, certain expert evidence which shows and which tells us what I think anybody would know in any event. It's common sense, which is that to have this person who is already suffering as a result of what's happened to her, to force her to have to come to court over and over again. And what had happened, by the time we filed this claim, I think the case had been adjourned on 20-something occasions over the course of 4 years. And the victim was made to appear at most of those occasions. And every time she comes to court, she has to see the accused. Things are being said by the lawyers and by the accused, you know, that's re-traumatizing her, basically. So we brought an action to say that, look, the state has a duty towards these victims, and the state has a duty to ensure that they are not caused harm by the criminal process itself. And we sought an order, basically from the constitutional court, telling the criminal court that, look, you need to expedite this particular matter based on her circumstances, her peculiar circumstances, based on her expert evidence showing that she's being re-traumatized every time she comes to court. The High Court agreed and said that, yes, not on the same grounds that we argued it, but the High Court did grant an order expediting the criminal trial, which is the first time this has ever been done in this jurisdiction. The matter went to the Court of Appeal, was heard urgently, and the Court of Appeal disagreed with the High Court judge and basically said that no, the judge was wrong to make that order expediting expediting the criminal matter. And we are seeking to appeal the matter now to the Privy Council. But it is a watershed case, and we think that if it succeeds, you know, it will make us, or make the state think differently about the obligations that it has towards victims in the criminal justice system generally.
But can't we say the same about the accused? Accused has a right to a fair, accused have a right to a fair trial, but as senior counsel Khan said last week, there's no right to an expedited trial. Well, of course, you know, one can argue that, you know, in terms of the politics of the justice system and the delays caused by many factors. But I know the Constitution does not specifically refer to victims, but then why do you think that victims, that the court should recognize that they have rights?
Okay, so just like the common law and the statute, the Constitution is not static, and the Constitution also, the interpretation of the Constitution changes, you know, and so as the morality of society changes, as there's more recognition, for instance, there's more recognition now of the plight of victims and the type of psychological issues that they suffer when there's delay, and perhaps even the delay now is more significant than it used to be. The court has a duty to interpret the Constitution in a way that takes into account the current scenario, for want of a better word. And basically, we are saying that, yes, the Constitution does not speak specifically of victims, but it says, for instance, that everybody has the right to security of the person.
Yeah.
And that means basically everybody has a right to their bodily integrity, to not be harmed. And that includes, there's authority that says that includes psychological harm. So we are saying basically that the state action is causing the psychological harm. And therefore, victims obviously are people, and all people are entitled to these rights. And therefore, that right to security of the person must include the victim and includes their right not to suffer psychological harm as a result of actions or inactions of the state. Now, your question about the accused persons, yes, this is our argument, of course. The state has other arguments. It will be decided, hopefully, by the Privy Council. But the cases that have gone before the courts, the constitutional cases dealing with the right to a speedy trial, those cases have been brought by accused persons who are seeking to quash their indictments. And the civil court has basically been saying, look, you have a remedy in the criminal court to deal with that issue. In other words, you want to stop the trial because there's been delay. The criminal court has power under abuse of process, etc., to stop the trial. So we are not going to grant you that remedy. Go to the criminal court to get it. But in our case, it's obviously much different. We, the victim, is not seeking to stop the trial. We are not seeking to quash the indictment. In fact, we are seeking the opposite. We are seeking to have our trial. And that having our trial is not against anybody's interest. It's not against the interest of the accused. It's in fact in his interest. Having the trial is not against the public interest. It is for the public interest. So therefore, we are saying that all of those considerations that the courts took into account when they said an accused person can't basically have his indictment quashed because of delay. Those things don't apply to a victim who's seeking to have a trial. It's two different things.
Totally. And of course, because of such delays, sometimes victims, I guess because of the psychological damage and harm, they often decide, well, at some point, they don't want to give evidence again. How does the court treat with that?
Well, Ronald, it really is a vicious cycle, right? Because a victim comes forward. They are not treated the way that they should be treated by the police officers who are dealing with them. The case is delayed. They're not kept up to date as to what's happening with the case. All of these years pass, and what happens is that they are then completely dissatisfied with the system. And it's not only the victim themselves, all the victim's family, anybody who knows the victim will tell them their story and that they're getting no justice from the courts. And then, so imagine all of these hundreds and thousands of victims who are all out there dissatisfied with the system and all of the people that they speak to. What is going to happen when somebody else is harmed? When a criminal offense occurs, somebody else is raped, and they think, oh my God, look at what is going to happen to me.
Yeah.
Is it going to encourage them to come forward? They will not be encouraged. And therefore, it leads to people not reporting crimes. People are not reporting crimes. It means that criminals feel emboldened that they can go and commit crimes and people aren't going to report it. So it's a vicious cycle. And if it's not dealt with, this issue of victims and treating them as if they have rights under the Constitution, if it's not dealt with, we will not get a grapple on the crime situation.
Yeah, and of course, it's varying factors: detection, obviously, speedy trial, a fair trial, and not allowing or not putting the victim to feel as though they to feel as though they are secondary, that they have secondary considerations or secondary rights before the criminal courts.
Yes, and that is in essence, I think that, I mean, we're speaking generally, but
Yes.
generally, our system, it really focuses a lot on the rights of the accused, and there's lots of laws in place to ensure that the accused have their rights, but there's not enough focus on the rights of the victim. And that needs to change. I'm not saying the victim should have more rights, but the courts should be focusing whenever a court is making a decision, in any kind of a case management decision dealing with a criminal matter. They should be thinking, yes, I must be fair to the accused, but the next thing that they must be thinking, or at the same time, they should be thinking, what about the victim? I have an application to adjourn this matter, but what about the victim? How is this going to affect the victim? Every decision that they make, they should be thinking about that. And I don't think culturally, I mean, there may be judicial officers that do that, but I think culturally, the majority, we just don't have that happening in the courts.
Yeah. Now, let's look at victims and the police. Now, before we even, let's say, go to court, victims will seek some form of protection from the police. Now, if they have a civil option available to them, why is the role of the police so important?
Well, obviously, I mean, yes, the civil court is important, right? But victims also, I mean, depending on the type of conduct, right? If it's a very serious offense, a serious criminal offense, I mean, victims expect, for instance, let's say a serious domestic violence offense. I mean, the victims are in danger, right? Constantly. So they would expect when they go to the police and make a report that the police are going to act immediately. They're going to come and remove them from the danger, right? Now, in terms of actually, as I explained already, the civil court is can't apprehend anybody, right? But in the criminal court, if it's a serious offense, the person can be apprehended and taken before the court and lose their liberty. And there's certain serious cases in which that is warranted because of the seriousness of the offense. So there are victims who, because of the seriousness of the conduct, you're talking about violent offenses, etc. The victim expects that to happen because they know what has happened to them and how serious it is. Like we gave an example of a case of rape. A rape victim goes to the police and they expect, this is such a serious matter, that this person is going to be taken off of the street, and that when they will have their day in court sooner rather than later, and if they're convicted, they will be off of the street for a period of time. That is what is expected. Now, the civil court cannot give them that. So we still need the criminal system to be working effectively for victims.
Yeah, and you succeeded. I mean, one of your other successes that you succeeded in a case recently which dealt with the duty of the police to investigate crimes against children. I mean, one would think that is obvious. Now tell us about this matter.
Yeah, so this was a case where a victim of the child pornography offenses went to the police. So she only found out that the images and the videos were being distributed when she became an adult. But she went to the police because somebody had messaged her to basically and sent her a link to some videos that she realized was videos of her when she was a child. And this has been going on. This is not a unique thing where there are certain men out there, they are members of child porn groups and they share images and videos of child pornography. And what they do, even worse, is that they within these groups try to determine what is the identities of these children. And then they would private message them and essentially try to groom them and threaten them to give more content or to meet them somewhere or something like that. And therefore the offense is really is perpetuated, right? And this particular girl, the gentleman attempted to do that to her. She went to the police and reported it, and the police basically ignored the report. I mean, and over the course of years, thank goodness, the young lady, she did her own investigating and found out about all of these groups. She went to the police with it. And I mean, suffice it to say, to this day, we do not have any charges, far less convictions. for an offense under these child pornography laws, even though this conduct is going on online. And so we brought a case essentially to say that the police have failed in their duty to investigate these matters. What it requires is for the police to get basic tools such as phones that they can use, VPNs, fake profiles, because what they need to do is just what this young girl did. She investigated the matter herself, is they need to go and join these groups anonymously and try to get information about who are the victims, because the information about the victims is being shared. Find out who are the victims, and then they need to do old-fashioned police work to determine whether these are in fact children and whether they live in this jurisdiction, etc. But the court, the High Court, basically found that these basic resources, the phones, VPNs, etc., the police did not have it, and that the court made an order of mandamus, you call it, requiring the state to provide those items to the police. The state has since appealed that decision, so we are now before the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal has to decide basically whether the judge was correct to make that order that the police must be given these tools that they need to investigate.
But you know, sometimes you find that in civil matters, judges make certain declarations or certain orders, but then, like for instance, let's look at the Tot Lampkin matter, the application with respect to domestic violence, that novel matter that displayed that give the police responsibility for investigating the domestic violence. But then it stops there. Why aren't the police acting upon the pronouncements of civil court judges to ensure that the policing system is effectively, pursued?
Look, I think that there is a serious cultural problem within the police service. There are certain types of offenses. It appears that domestic violence is one of them for whatever reason, I don't know. These types of offenses, like these child pornography offenses, there are certain types of offenses that, for one reason or the other, they are just not treated by the police with the urgency that is required. And I'm not saying that that is always the case 100% of the time, but there are simply too many cases that you read about all of the time where persons are going and making reports and the police simply are not taking the matter seriously. They see this as a matter between man and wife. This is a matter in the home, and that for some reason they should not get involved.
Or it should go to the civil court.
A deep cultural issue that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and it takes a holistic approach. I mean, attorneys can only do so much in terms of applying the law and getting certain declarations, certain orders. But then if the state, by its various entities, do not act, then it's just a cycle that we are just basically just creating case laws without any follow-ups.
Yeah, all it's doing is the court is indicating that yes, people have these rights and people have been wronged, and the police I don't know if eventually, if many cases are brought and we succeed many times, that eventually it will seep down and the police will do what they're supposed to do. But one or two cases, it appears, is not enough. And maybe it is that just more people need to come forward and more cases need to be brought, and that eventually, it's either that it happens that way through the court, or the powers that be take some type of action.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm not an expert in this area, but they take some type of action, administrative or whatever, to ensure that this culture changes. Indeed.
Lee, that our time is now we have to wrap up. Of course, time flies. And just your closing words in terms of your where you see reform going, if there's any, in terms of protecting victims' rights.
No, I think there are some of us who are trying to do what we can do through the court system, but really I don't think that is the quickest or the best way for this to be done. It really requires the powers that be, requires those involved in politics, requires those who are in charge of the police service, and other arms like such as the judiciary as well, to really look at this matter very closely and take concrete measures to ensure that some of these culture changes are eradicated.
Yeah, correct. And I totally agree. Lee Mary, Senior Counsel, thank you so much. I believe we definitely need a follow-up, particularly when those determinations are made, and it's with great hope that you are successful, particularly for victims. I want to thank you on behalf of the team for doing noble and human service to your country, and as well to persons who really require that sort of advocacy that you are bringing to them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Randall.
Right,
Thanks
have
for
a
having
great
me.
day. So guys, it is a wrap, obviously. You have been watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. I'm your host, Randall Donowa, attorney at law. Thank you so much to Lee Mary, Senior Counsel. And before we go, I leave you with this quote, of course. When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. Jimi Hendrix. Have a good day. God bless.
WESN.
Diwali Passport, brought to you by Chatak Food Products and Anand brand wax deers.
Lighting up for Diwali just got simple with the easy-to-use Anand brand wax deers. They're scientifically engineered to last longer, burn brighter, and keep on lighting. Anand brand wax deers do not require any prepping or filling and has less spillage and cleanup. These deers are recommended for outdoor use and can withstand light wind and rain. Plus, they're eco-friendly. Redeem your use cases for cash back. So put